Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm animating myself into anime. Usually I just draw myself into screenshots from anime, but recently my patron Addie suggested that I animate myself into anime so that I move. I thought this idea sounded really interesting and I wanted to give it a try. So the first anime I am going to try animating myself into is Pretty Cure Delicious Party. I chose this one because I want to animate something that had a good amount of movement, and since Pretty Cure has some action, I thought it would be a good fit. My idea for this one is that I'll run alongside Nagomi. I'm going to trace over her poses and edit the details to make it look more like how I usually draw myself. I wanted to pick something simple since this is my first time animating myself into an anime, and you might be thinking that a running animation isn't very simple, but in this case it's simple for me because I can basically just copy the animation for Nagomi. I don't have to do much for trying to figure things out on my own. So once I sketch out the first frame, I move on to the next frame. I don't re-sketch the rest of the character, instead I move it to the same position as Nagomi and then make the needed changes. The things that change the most is the arms and the hair, so I am most of the time just redrawing those. And also moving the body around because it kind of moves up and down, up and down. The hair was confusing to me because the animation for it didn't seem to have a lot of reason as to why it was moving the way it was. Or maybe I just wasn't seeing it. For my hair, I tried to mimic the kind of movements the best that I could. If I noticed the hair was moving up or out, I would make my hair do the same thing. If I noticed it was moving in or down, I would do the same. Hopefully it'll look okay in the end. I was a bit nervous it wouldn't work. I didn't really know what I was doing for the hair. So I was drawing my sketches over the character so I could get the same poses and movement, but obviously I don't want my drawings to be covering the character completely. So I select my sketch animation folder and move all of my sketches over. Now I'm working on the line art like I usually do in my anime edits. I'm using the 4 Effect line pen, and the line art for the anime is a dark brown, and the size of my brush is 2.5. I kind of like how they use brown for their line art. A lot of times the color I see is an off black, but in this case they use brown. At first I was going to draw myself behind Nagomi, but if I did that I would then have to draw my frames around the parts that would be overlapping, like the hair and the arm that moves back and forth. That did not sound fun to do, so I took the easy way out and put myself more in the foreground. For my line art, I had 2 layers grouped together in a folder. The one layer was for things I did not want to edit, and the second layer was for things I did want to edit. So basically almost all of the line art was on the don't edit layer. The only things I had in the edit layer were the hair and the arm, since they're basically the only things moving. For my line art, I am using vector layers. Basically, this allows me to select parts of my line art and make changes. This made it so I didn't have to keep redrawing the strands of hair. I could kind of just move them. I would have to do a little drawing sometimes to make the lines reconnect. For the most part, I felt like this was easier than having to completely redraw the strands every single time. So I'm glad I used the vector layers. After doing the line art for the first 5 frames, I noticed I forgot the glasses, so I had to add those in. I tried my best to line them up in the same spot for each frame. Also, it may look like this animation has a lot of frames, but it's actually just 5 frames repeating themselves, and then those 5 frames replay, but in different positions. So for my frames, I had to just draw 5 main frames, and then I make copies of those 5 frames and move them to the correct positions. So in total there are 10 frames, but I only have to actually draw 5 of them. Now that I have all of the frames, I need to make them loop. I did this by copying my frames and then pasting them over and over, but somehow when I did this, my frames ended up being a bit different in timing. So I scrolled through frame by frame and matched up each pose with the timing of the character. Also, I didn't actually want me to run in sync with her. I thought that may look a little odd, so I actually moved all of my frames over a bit so that the movement would be happening at different times. My running is the same, just happening at a different timing. So as you can see, I am now doing the coloring. For my color scheme, I'm going with a teal theme since I like teal. For my skin, I made it more yellow because my skin is kind of an olive color, I think. Nogami has brown hair like me, but to make me be a little different, I made the brown for my hair darker and a little on the cooler side. Nogami's hair was a little bit of a warmer brown. The coloring process was definitely the most time-consuming part. Pretty Cure always has a decent amount of shading and highlights, so this makes things take a bit longer, but it does look really pretty. The most time-consuming part is the hair because it has highlights and shadows. In this scene, the hair is also moving a lot, so I have to keep changing the shading and highlights while also keeping them consistent. One thing I end up doing is using the liquify tool to move things around, especially the highlight area. I was able to move it around without needing to redraw it completely. I just needed to do some cleanup. Delicious Party Pretty Cure is a really cute show. I love the style of it. It's so cute and adorable. I am behind on the show because it stopped airing for a while, but it's been airing again. So there are new episodes, but I haven't gotten around to watching them yet. But yeah, the show is really cute. My siblings and I were watching it together. If you're looking for a cute anime to watch with younger siblings, this seems to be a good one. But they do have to be able to read since it's not a dub. The younger siblings sometimes have a hard time reading fast enough, so we have to explain things sometimes. Also, I usually draw myself into 3 anime, but since I am animating myself and animation takes way longer, I am only doing 2 shows for this video. I was actually a bit surprised I was able to get 2 done. I was worried I would only be able to get 1 animation done. I think this one took me a little over 3 hours to finish. So it didn't take as long as I was expecting, thankfully. So something that I often need to do for my screenshot edits is that I need to blur my art a little bit. And this usually doesn't take much work, but for animating it takes much more work. I have to go to each frame, merge and rasterize my layers, and then blur them. I repeat this for each line art frame and coloring frame. The blur isn't super noticeable in the footage, but when I was doing it, I was able to tell the difference. And it looked like it was matching up with the show a bit better. The super crisp art always looks a bit out of place. Also, a lot of times I get people telling me that I don't blur it enough, and I try to blur it as much as I can without getting too blurry. You see, Clip Studio Paint kind of has these certain levels of blurriness, and the lowest level of blurry matches up pretty good. But the next step of blurriness is a little bit too blurry and looks a little weird. So I go for the slightly more crisp compared to the overly blurry. So yeah, that's why my art still sometimes looks a little bit more crisp than the art, but it's just because that's the closest I can get it. So I thought I was all done, but then I noticed I needed to add the magical light stuff from my watch. So I made a line with a teal color, and then under that I made a layer set to multiply to add a slight shadow like the other laser beam has. Then I just need to go to the different frames and line it up. This part wasn't very hard, just kind of tedious. Okay, now it's done and we can see the result. Also, I did edit the audio a little bit to keep the automatic YouTube system from flagging my video, hopefully. So that's why the audio sounds a little different. Also, the character that is talking in the scene is this character, but you don't see him on screen. Anyways, here is the finished result.
ごめんなさい。でもやっぱりあなたを戦いに巻き込みたくないの。
So yeah, this is me animated into Pretty Cure. I thought it was neat just drawing myself into anime, but animating myself into it takes it to a whole new level. I think it's really cool. Shout out to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. I'm a YouTuber and do pretty much all of my work online. That's why I use NordVPN to help protect my information from malicious people. NordVPN is sponsoring this video, but I've been one of their customers for a while now. I can do my work online without having to worry about malware-ridden websites and phishing websites because NordVPN automatically blocks them. If this sounds interesting, you can get a 2-year plan plus 1 month free with a huge discount by clicking on nordvpn.com/loveToDraw. But not only does NordVPN protect your info, it also lets you access content everywhere and access content from other countries. Like you can see what anime the Japanese Netflix has. It's really neat. Also, it's available on multiple devices, so I can even be protected when using my phone. I highly recommend NordVPN. I'm a very happy customer. And like I said, you can get a 2-year plan plus 1 month free with a huge discount by clicking on nordvpn.com/loveToDraw. So go join NordVPN today, and thank you so much again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Okay, so let's get back to animating. So the next anime I am animating myself into is Haikyu. It's my favorite anime, so I really wanted to try animating myself next to the characters. The scene I chose is this one of Hinata and Kageyama kind of bickering, like they usually do. So for the first animation, I basically just drew over a character and copied the frames. But for this one, I'll be doing a lot more freehand work and making my own frames. So I'm starting by getting an idea of where I want to be placed and for my animation and key moments. I wanted to place myself in between Hinata and Kageyama. I thought it would be funny to have me kind of just awkwardly existing as they were kind of bickering or talking. I placed myself a bit closer to Kageyama because he moves less. Hinata does a lot of moving and I did not want to have to draw around all of those frames. That would be super tedious because he moves a ton. So now that I have an idea of what I want to do, I'll start sketching in the actual character. Usually for my anime edits, I'll use a pre-existing character as a base. And I sort of do that here, but it's a little different this time. I'm not directly tracing over Shimizu because she is in front view. I got this art from her character sheet. I wanted my character to be turned instead of facing the camera, so I'm mostly using Shimizu as a guide for how to proportion the body and face, but I am drawing everything turned a bit. This way I can match the style, but also draw the art how I want it to be. Hopefully it will still end up looking pretty close in style. Also, I've drawn myself into Haikyu before, so I brought this art in as a reference so that I'm drawing myself in the same kind of way. Once I have the rough sketch of my character, I start sketching the character and details more cleanly so they are ready for line art later on. So the animation starts with me just kind of standing there looking at Hinata, but then he kind of aggressively moves and starts shouting something like, "Next, let's have a blocking competition." Since he does this sudden outburst and movement, it kind of startles me and I bring my hands up in a kind of nervous way. Right here, I am doing a very rough and messy sketch of the hands on my rough layer, and then I clean them up on my cleanup sketch layer. I was a little concerned about needing to draw the arms in a foreshortened way, but thankfully I feel like they turned out overall okay. Also, I hope I did a good enough job at mimicking the style for the hands. I kind of kept looking at the hands of the female characters and tried to mimic them the best I could. When Kageyama starts talking, I make a slightly confused face like, oh, they're not fighting. Kageyama says something like the loser has to buy the winner yogurt or something like that, and then Hinata agrees and I make a kind of nervous, relieved face. Like, you two are so silly. So now that my sketch for the keyframes are done, I move on to line art. I'm going to focus on the line art for the keyframes first, and then I'll do the in-betweens later. You may notice that the scenes I'm animating myself into don't have subtitles. When I was capturing the footage, I turned off subtitles because I did not want to have to deal with animating around them. When I'm doing my drawing edits, I find it tedious just drawing around the subtitles, let alone animating around them. When I finish the first frame, I copy my line art to the next frame and then make the changes. I did this so things would stay consistent and it's also less work. When I'm drawing the startled frame, I move my whole character up a bit, and I also raise my shoulders to make my character look more surprised. Thankfully, the vector layers make these changes pretty easy since I can move my line art around. I can also select the individual lines and delete them, which is a lot faster than manually erasing. The third frame isn't too different. I moved my character back down because I'm not startled. I also lower my shoulders for the same reason. I thought adding these subtle movements would help add more personality to my character. I also needed to change my face to have a more confused expression, and I am now looking at Kageyama. But also at this part, Kageyama moved, so I do also need to redraw my lines around him. I know I kind of said it before, but I'm really glad I was able to fit myself by Kageyama so Hinata doesn't overlap me. It was enough work just needing to draw around Kageyama. For the last frame, I was thinking about tilting my head just to add some extra movement, but that sounded like a lot of unneeded work, so I didn't. But I did move my hands down a bit because my character is becoming more relaxed. Also, I kept failing to select my vector lines. If I accidentally click the wrong spot, it will deselect what I selected. Also, I kept selecting points within my selection, and I don't know how to unselect them once I do that, but I can't do that or else things get weird when I move things. And yeah, I had to attempt the selecting process a few times. So now it's time for the in-betweens. Basically, this will help my movements feel a bit smoother and less choppy. So basically, I just have to take parts of my line art and move it into the kind of middle point in each frame. When I was studying the frames for Hinata and Kageyama's movements, it seems that they kind of just have one transition frame for the bigger movements, and these transitions last about 2 frames. So I did the same thing for my movement. The trickiest part, I think, was drawing my arms going to the upward position. At first I was trying to reuse the hands I had already drawn, but this just looked really weird and broken, so I needed to draw some new ones. I didn't sketch these out beforehand, so I was trying to freehand it with the line art. I was feeling too lazy to sketch them. And yes, these hands look wonky and a bit weird, but they're only going to last for like 2 frames, so it probably doesn't matter too much. I thought the face I was making when I'm going to my closed eyes looked really funny. It looks like I'm making a really weird face. The one thing that was a bit of work for the in-between frames is that because my character moves up and down, I had to keep redrawing the outline over and over around Kageyama. But I am happy I added that bit of up and down movement. I feel like it adds to the animation, compared to just having me stay at the same level the whole time. Animation has a lot of repetition, and I may be kind of odd, but I don't mind things that are really repetitive for the most part. It's probably why I like games like Harvest Moon, where you basically just do the same thing every day. But after a while of doing the same things again and again, it does get a bit tiring. I'm glad I'm not an animation only channel. But I do really enjoy getting to experiment with animation from time to time. So now we're on to the coloring. The coloring for Haikyu is much simpler than Pretty Cure. Plus I'm not moving as much, so it did go a bit faster. I did enjoy animating myself into Pretty Cure, but since I was just running alongside Nagomi, it didn't feel as immersive, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but like for this animation, I'm interacting with the characters more. So it kind of feels a lot more like the character I'm drawing is in the anime. Plus I'm drawing a lot more facial expressions that I would make and the kind of mannerisms I have. So it feels a lot more like I'm in the anime. I was talking to my sister Reagan, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny to trick someone into thinking there is a character they never noticed? Like you would say something like, I love this character in this show, they are my favorite, and that person would be like, who? I don't remember them. And you would be like, you don't know that character? How? And then you show them pictures that you edited the character into, and also show them scenes that you animated the character into. And they would be so confused that they like never noticed that character before. It'd be a very elaborate prank, but I feel like it'd be really funny. Oh, lastly, I edited the sweat mark. I made it black, but I noticed that Haikyu uses white and will add a little shadow. So I changed that to match. And I also did the usual blurring process like I did for the last one. Okay, so let's see the finished result. Like last time, I edited the audio a little bit.
影山が日向のバネを多少なりとも伸ばしてるってことか。
It was so much fun animating myself into these anime. It was also a neat way to practice animation. If you enjoyed watching this video, please consider subscribing and turning all notifications on. It helps the channel out a lot. Also, I want to say a big thank you to my YouTube members and patrons. Hello to my new members, Julius and Roseberry. I'm so thankful for everyone's support. I'm also thankful for you. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!